the sky explodes without warning. Engines roar low and fast over the harbor as the first bombs tear into battleship steel. Sailors stumble from their bunks into smoke, fire, and screaming alarms. Fuel ignites across the water, turning the sea itself into flame. Anti-aircraft guns open up blindly as torpedoes slice through the calm morning surface. Men dive overboard, uniforms burning, lungs filling with oil-soaked water. Above them, red suns flash on wings, banking hard for another run. Radios crackle with disbelief. This isn't an exercise, this isn't a drill. In minutes, the most powerful fleet in the Pacific is bleeding at anchor. By the time the smoke begins to lift, America has been violently pulled into a war it believed was still an ocean away. On the morning of December 7, 1941, the United States was officially at peace. Its people argued about Europe, about Asia, about whether another global war was worth American blood. In Hawaii, sailors prepared for Sunday inspections. Officers planned routine drills. The Pacific Fleet sat in Pearl Harbor as a symbol of deterrence rather than imminent battle. That assumption would shatter in less than 2 hours. The roots of the attack lay far from Hawaii, in the grinding pressures of empire and resources. By the late 1930s, Japan was locked into an expanding war in China. Its industrial economy depended on imported oil, steel, and rubber, resources controlled largely by Western powers. As Japan advanced deeper into Asia, the United States responded with economic pressure, culminating in an oil embargo that threatened to strangle the Japanese military within months. Tokyo's leaders faced a stark choice: abandon imperial ambitions or seize the resources they needed by force. Strategists within the Imperial Japanese Navy understood that war with the United States would be long and dangerous. America's industrial capacity dwarfed Japan's. Victory could not come from attrition. Instead, Japanese planners sought a decisive opening blow, one that would cripple American naval power in the Pacific and buy time to secure Southeast Asia. The man who shaped this vision was Admiral Hirosuke Yamamoto, a naval aviator who understood both American strength and American psychology. He believed that only a shocking, paralyzing strike could give Japan a chance. Pearl Harbor became the focal point. The harbor was shallow, crowded, and assumed to be safe from large-scale air attack. American doctrine still centered on battleships as the backbone of naval power. Aircraft carriers, though growing in importance, were seen as support assets rather than decisive weapons. This mismatch in assumptions would prove catastrophic. Japanese planners spent months refining the operation. Pilots trained to fly low and slow, perfecting torpedo drops designed for shallow water. Intelligence officers studied harbor layouts, ship schedules, and defensive routines. The attack force, 6 aircraft carriers with over 350 planes, sailed across the North Pacific under strict radio silence, navigating through rough seas to avoid detection. It was one of the most complex naval operations ever attempted. In Washington, diplomatic negotiations continued even as the strike force closed in. Messages were exchanged, deadlines debated, intentions obscured by ambiguity and mistrust. American intelligence intercepted Japanese communications but struggled to interpret their full meaning. Warnings existed, but they were fragmented and unfocused. Few believed Hawaii itself was the target. At 7:48 a.m. local time, the first wave struck. Bombers and torpedo planes descended on Battleship Row with devastating precision. The USS Arizona was hit by a bomb that detonated her forward magazine, killing over 1,000 men in seconds. The explosion split the ship open, sending a column of fire skyward that could be seen across the island. Nearby, the USS Oklahoma capsized after multiple torpedo hits, trapping sailors inside her hull as she rolled. Chaos consumed the harbor. Anti-aircraft crews fought back with what weapons they could reach, often firing without clear targets. Pilots scrambled from airfields already under attack, many aircraft destroyed on the ground to prevent sabotage, a defense against a threat that never came. Hospitals filled with the wounded, while rescue teams worked desperately to cut trapped men free from sinking ships. A second wave followed, targeting airfields, repair facilities, and remaining vessels. By mid-morning, the attack was over. In less than 2 hours, more than 2,400 Americans were dead, nearly 200 aircraft destroyed, and 8 battleships sunk or damaged. The Pacific Fleet lay battered, but not annihilated. Crucially, America's aircraft carriers were not in port that morning. Fuel storage facilities and submarine bases were left untouched. These omissions, whether deliberate or circumstantial, would shape the course of the war. The attack had been tactically brilliant, but strategically incomplete. Across the Pacific, Japanese commanders celebrated what they believed was a decisive victory. Yet even as the smoke rose from Pearl Harbor, the long-term balance of power was already shifting. The United States was wounded, but not broken. Industrial capacity, once fully mobilized, would transform the loss into a catalyst for unprecedented production and innovation. On December 8th, President Franklin D. Roosevelt addressed Congress, calling the attack a date which will live in infamy. The declaration of war passed almost unanimously. Isolationism collapsed overnight. Millions volunteered for service. Factories converted to wartime output. The psychological effect Yamamoto sought had indeed been achieved, but not in the way Japan intended. For the men who survived Pearl Harbor, the cost was immediate and personal. Survivors carried memories of burning decks, oil-choked water, and the sound of metal tearing apart. Families on the mainland received telegrams that transformed ordinary mornings into lifelong grief. The attack redefined American identity, replacing distance with vulnerability and debate with resolve. In strategic terms, Pearl Harbor accelerated a transformation in warfare. Battleships gave way to carrier-based air power. Radar, intelligence coordination, and joint operations became central to victory. Within 6 months, the United States and Japan would clash again at Midway, where the balance of naval power would swing decisively. Pearl Harbor was not simply an attack, it was a collision of assumptions. Japan assumed America would seek compromise after a stunning blow. America assumed geography provided safety. Both were wrong. What followed was a global war that would reshape borders, societies, and the nature of conflict itself. Today, the harbor is quiet again. Sunken ships remain beneath the water, serving as war graves and silent witnesses. The events of that morning continue to echo, not as a lesson in surprise alone, but as a reminder of how quickly peace can dissolve when strategy, fear, and miscalculation converge.